Two hitmen attacked me. My military training kicked in. Within moments, they were lying on the ground. One of their phones buzzed. A text from my wife's number read, "Is my idiot husband finished? I need that insurance money ASAP." I texted back, "All done. I'll collect the rest of the payment in person." When I returned home, my wife was sipping wine with her lover, celebrating my demise. Their jaw dropped with shock to see me alive, and what I did to them is history. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The metal taste of morning coffee never quite matched what John Week remembered from overseas. He sat in the small kitchen of his Benton Falls home, watching steam rise from the chipped mug while frost patterns crawled across the window above the sink. Outside, Michigan winter had turned the world gray and silent. 9 years in the Army. Infantry first, then security operations in places where the heat could kill you as easily as the bullets. John had come home 3 years ago expecting relief, maybe even peace. Instead, he'd found a wife who looked at him like a stranger in a town that felt smaller than he remembered. The construction job had been easy to get. Mike Thornton, who ran Thornton & Sons, had been desperate for someone who showed up on time and didn't complain. John ran crews now, roofing mostly, some foundation work when the weather allowed. Early mornings in the cold. Calloused hands. Paychecks that came regular. It was honest work, the kind that let him sleep at night. Mary hated it. "You used to have ambition," she'd said last month, standing in this same kitchen with her arms crossed. "Now you just exist." John had been tying his work boots. He'd glanced up at her, taking in the tight set of her jaw, the way her fingers drummed against her forearm. "I have a job. A job isn't a life, John." He'd finished with his laces and stood. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to be the man I married." Her voice had cracked on the last word, but her eyes stayed hard. "You came back different." Different. That word again. What Mary meant was that he'd stopped chasing noise. Stopped filling silence with meaningless conversation. Stopped pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The Army had taught him to notice things, the details people missed when they were too busy talking. The way someone's eyes moved before they lied. The pause before an answer that should have been immediate. The subtle shift in posture that meant trouble was coming. He noticed those things in Mary now. The way she turned her phone face down when he entered her room. The new perfume she wore on Tuesday afternoons when she supposedly had yoga class. The credit card bills for restaurants he'd never been to, always lunch, always the same place. Iron and Oak Bistro, downtown. 12 times in 2 months. John hadn't confronted her. What would be the point? She'd deny it, or she'd admit it, and either way the marriage was already over. He'd been through enough to know when something was past saving. He just hadn't expected her to try killing him. The realization came on Old Quarry Road, 3 miles outside town, where the pavement ran along Lake Benton's eastern shore. John had been driving back from a job site, his truck cab still smelling of sawdust and sweat. The road twisted through thick pine forest, and the late afternoon sun barely penetrated the canopy. His headlights were already on. That's when he first noticed the sedan. It stayed 3 car lengths back, matching his speed exactly through the curves. Dark blue, maybe black, hard to tell in the shadows. Michigan plates, too far to read. One occupant visible in the driver's seat, maybe more in the back. John eased off the gas. The sedan slowed. He accelerated slightly. The sedan matched him. Training kicked in. Not panic, not even concern. Just awareness. He ran through possibilities the way he'd been taught. Lost tourist following GPS directions. Local resident headed to one of the lakeside cabins. Coincidence? Or not coincidence? His hand stayed relaxed on the wheel. He checked his mirrors again, this time looking for details. The sedan's front bumper had damage on the left side. The windshield had a crack running from the passenger side. 2 men visible now, driver and front passenger, both wearing dark clothing. Old Quarry Road didn't lead anywhere except to a handful of vacation properties that sat empty this time of year. No reason for anyone to be on this stretch unless they lived here, and John knew every resident who wintered at the lake. The Kowalskis, the retired judge, Patterson, the writer woman from Detroit who came up on weekends. These men weren't any of them. The sedan accelerated suddenly, closing the gap between vehicles. John's eyes flicked to his rearview mirror, measuring distances, calculating response times. The road ahead curved sharp right in a quarter mile, then straightened for a brief stretch before more curves. The sedan bumped his rear panel. Not hard, just enough to make the truck fishtail slightly on the cold asphalt. John corrected smoothly, his grip still relaxed, his breathing steady. Another bump followed, harder this time. His toolbox rattled in the truck bed. Amateur hour, John thought. Professionals wouldn't telegraph their intentions like this. They'd have forced him off the road already or boxed him in with a second vehicle. He let the truck slow naturally, pulling toward the shoulder where the road widened slightly. The sedan stopped behind him, maybe 15 feet back. Both front doors opened simultaneously. John took 3 seconds to observe them through his mirrors. Driver, early 30s, medium build, wore sneakers. Wrong choice for this terrain. New jacket, still had the fold lines from the package. Right-handed based on which side, he wore his watch. Passenger, older, 40s maybe, heavier, moved slower. He wore boots, but cheap ones, the kind that had no traction. His jacket hung awkwardly on one side, carrying something in the right pocket. John opened his door and stepped out, keeping his movements unhurried. The cold air hit his face, sharp and clean. Pine scent mixed with the smell of lake water and decaying leaves. His breath formed clouds in the fading light. "You gentlemen have a problem?" John's voice was level, almost friendly. The driver approached too fast, his footwork sloppy. He'd obviously never learned how to move in a fight. The passenger hung back, one hand sliding inside his jacket. "Just need you to come with us," the driver said. His voice shook slightly. "Nervous? Won't take long. Come where? Just come on, man. Don't make this hard." The passenger's hand emerged from his jacket holding a revolver. Old model, maybe a .38. His grip was wrong. Too tight, thumb positioned incorrectly. First time holding a gun, John guessed. Or close to it. "Put your hands up," the passenger said. John had run the calculations the moment he saw the weapon. Distance, 12 feet. Passenger's reaction time, slow, based on how he'd exited the vehicle. Driver's position, too close, unbalanced stance. Terrain, loose gravel near the shoulder, wet leaves on the pavement. "You really want to do this?" John asked quietly. The driver lunged forward, reaching for John's arm. "Mistake." John sidestepped, his body remembering movements drilled into muscle memory through thousands of hours of training. He caught the driver's extended arm, used the man's momentum against him, and drove his elbow into the solar plexus with controlled force. The driver folded, gasping, all the air driven from his lungs. The passenger tried to raise the revolver, but his feet slipped on the gravel. John closed the distance before he could recover, knocked the gun aside with one hand, and swept the man's legs out from under him. The passenger hit the pavement hard, his head bouncing once. The revolver skittered away into the roadside brush. John kept them both down with minimal effort. The driver couldn't breathe properly yet. The passenger was dazed, possibly concussed. Neither of them fought back when John zip-tied their hands behind them. Plastic ties he kept in his truck's emergency kit, same ones he used to secure tarps. They stayed conscious. They stayed alive. That had been intentional. John searched them efficiently. Wallets with driver's licenses, both from downstate, near Detroit. Cash. No credit cards. 3 cell phones between them, which was 2 phones too many for normal people. A folding knife on the driver. Car keys. One of the phones wouldn't stop buzzing. John picked it up. A burner phone, cheap prepaid model. The screen showed 3 incoming text messages, all from the same number. The contact name made his heart rate increase for the first time since the confrontation started. Mary, his wife's name, right there on a stranger's phone. John's thumb moved across the screen, opening the messages. The most recent one was time-stamped 2 minutes ago. "Is my idiot husband finished? I need that insurance money ASAP." The words sat there on the screen, glowing in the growing darkness. John read them twice, then a third time, making sure he understood exactly what they meant. The temperature hadn't changed, But something cold settled into his chest anyway. Not anger, not even hurt, just a clear, sharp understanding of reality. The driver groaned behind him. John ignored it. He scrolled up through the message history. Earlier exchanges painted a clear picture. Mary coordinating pickup times. Mary sending John's work schedule. Mary confirming the route he'd take home. Instructions about making it look like an accident. Details about the life insurance policy. $500,000, accidental death clause, beneficiary listed as spouse. His wife had hired men to kill him. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Answer me. John's fingers moved across the screen, his response calculated. It's done. I'll come by for the rest. He watched the typing indicator appear immediately. Mary was waiting for this news, probably sitting somewhere comfortable, maybe with a drink in her hand. Good. Don't mess this up. John pocketed the phone and walked back to the two men on the ground. The driver had recovered enough to speak. Look, man, we didn't. How much did she pay you? John's voice was quiet. The driver's eyes went wide. What? How much? 5,000. Each. Half up front. Where are you taking me? The passenger answered this time, his words slurred from the head impact. Quarry. Old limestone pit, 3 miles north. Make it look like you drove off the access road. John nodded slowly. The old Benton quarry had been abandoned for 20 years. Deep water, isolated location, no witnesses. They'd have weighted his body down, probably left his truck parked at the edge to suggest he'd been drinking. Clean, simple, hard to disprove. Mary had planned this carefully. Who else knows? John asked. Just her, the driver said quickly. And her boyfriend. Guy named Evan something. He helped set it up. Evan. The name confirmed what John had already suspected. Evan Cross, Mary's colleague from the insurance office where she worked part-time. The man she'd mentioned casually over dinners, always with a laugh that sounded just slightly off-key. John pulled out his own phone and called 911. Yeah, I need to report an attempted robbery on Old Quarry Road, about 3 miles east of town. He kept it simple. 2 men tried to rob him. He defended himself. They had weapons. Send deputies. While he waited for the police, John took photos of everything. The phones, the messages, the men's licenses, the revolver he'd retrieved from the brush, the damage to his truck's rear bumper. Evidence mattered. The driver tried talking again. She said you'd be easy. Said you were just some broken-down vet who wouldn't fight back. John almost smiled at that. She was wrong. What are you going to do? Let the law handle you too. John crouched down so they could see his face clearly in the dimming light. But her? That's different. Sirens approached in the distance, echoing across the lake. John stood and waited, his hands relaxed at his sides, his breathing steady. The cold had deepened as the sun dropped below the tree line. His breath came in thick clouds now. The temperature would drop below freezing tonight. He thought about Mary, sitting somewhere warm, checking her phone every few minutes, waiting for confirmation that she was a widow and $500,000 richer. The marriage had ended the moment he read those messages. Not emotionally, the emotions would come later, maybe, but legally, practically, definitively. Mary wanted money. She was about to get something very different. The deputies took 2 hours to process the scene. John gave his statement 3 times, once to the first responding officer, once to the sergeant who arrived 20 minutes later, and finally to Detective Linda Walsh, who'd been called in because attempted kidnapping fell under her jurisdiction. Walsh was thorough. She photographed the damage to John's truck, documented the weapons, collected the zip ties, and took possession of the 3 phones. When John mentioned the text messages, her expression hardened. You're saying your wife was involved in this? Walsh had asked, her pen poised over her notebook. I'm saying my wife's name is on one of those phones, and the messages suggest she hired these men. John kept his tone flat, factual. I'd like to press charges against everyone involved. Walsh had looked at him for a long moment. You understand what you're accusing her of? Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. Maybe other things. You know better than me. Where is your wife now? Home, probably. Or with her boyfriend. Another long look. Boyfriend, Evan Cross. Works with her at Midwest Mutual Insurance. I believe he's been helping her plan this. Walsh wrote it all down. We'll need to verify the messages, trace the phone's purchase history, Interview these two. She nodded toward the ambulance where the driver and passenger sat, both in handcuffs now. This is going to take time. I understand. Do you feel safe going home tonight? John had considered the question. Yes. You're sure? Detective, my wife thinks I'm dead right now. She's not a threat to me. Walsh had frowned at that. Maybe you should stay somewhere else anyway. Just until we sort this out. No. John's voice was firm. I'm going home. He meant it. Whatever happened next, it would happen in the house he'd paid for, the life he'd built. Mary had tried to take that from him. She'd failed. By the time John pulled into his driveway, full dark had fallen. The house lights were on, living room, kitchen, the upstairs bedroom. Mary's car sat in its usual spot. A second vehicle was parked on the street, a silver Lexus that John recognized. Evan Cross was inside. John sat in his truck for a moment, letting the engine tick as it cooled. The house looked peaceful from outside, warm light glowing through curtain windows. The small front porch with its two rocking chairs. The maple tree in the front yard that Mary had wanted to cut down last spring because the roots were buckling the sidewalk. This had been their home for 5 years. They'd bought it together after John's discharge, using his savings and a VA loan. Mary had picked out the paint colors, chosen the furniture, arranged every room exactly how she wanted it. Now she tried to make herself a widow in this same house. John stepped out of the truck. The motion sensor light above the garage flickered on. He walked to the front door, his work boots heavy on the wooden porch steps. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, he could hear voices from the kitchen. Mary's laugh, bright, genuine, the way she used to laugh with him years ago. A man's voice responding, too low to make out words. John closed the door behind him and locked it. The sound echoed through the front hallway. The voices stopped. He walked toward the kitchen, his movements unhurried. The hallway opened into a combined kitchen and dining area, Mary's favorite part of the house. She'd spent months picking out the right tile for the backsplash, the right fixtures for the sink. Mary and Evan sat at the kitchen table, wine glasses in front of them, half-empty bottle between them. Mary wore the blue dress she usually saved for special occasions. Evan had removed his suit jacket, draped it over the back of his chair. They'd been leaning close together, intimate. When John stepped into the doorway, both of them froze. Mary's face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, and something that looked almost like disappointment before she rearranged it into shock. John! Her voice came out too high. What are you doing home? I live here. John stayed in the doorway, blocking the only exit. Evan. Evan had already stood, his chair scraping loudly against the tile. He was younger than John had expected, early 30s maybe, with styled hair and expensive clothes. Soft hands, probably never done real work in his life. I should go, Evan said, reaching for his jacket. No. John's tone was conversational. I think you should stay. John, what's going on? Mary stood too, her fingers gripping the table edge. You're scaring me. Am I? Yes. You can't just... Evan is a friend. We were just... having wine while you wait to hear about my death? The words landed like a physical blow. Mary's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Evan went pale. What are you talking about? Mary tried to recover, but her voice shook now. John, have you been drinking? 2 men followed me on Old Quarry Road this evening. John watched their faces as he spoke, cataloging every micro-expression. They forced me to stop, pulled weapons, told me I had to come with them. Oh my God. Mary started forward, but John raised one hand, and she stopped. They had zip ties, and a plan to dump my truck at the old quarry. Make it look like an accident. He paused. The insurance pays double for accidental death, doesn't it? Evan moved then, trying to push past John toward the hallway. It was a clumsy attempt, desperation overriding common sense. John caught his arm and redirected his momentum into the wall. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to establish control. Evan bounced off the drywall and stumbled backward into the kitchen. Sit down, John said quietly. Evan sat. His hands were shaking. Mary had started crying. You're insane. I don't know what you're talking about. Evan, tell him. Mary. John's voice cut through her performance. I have the phone. She stopped mid-sentence. What phone? The burner phone. The one you used to text instructions to the men who tried to kill me. He pulled it from his pocket and held it up. The one with all your messages about the insurance money. The tears dried up almost instantly. Mary's face went blank, then calculating. John could see her mind working, trying to find an angle, a way to spin this. That could be anyone's phone, she said finally. It has your number saved as Mary. The messages reference details only you would know. My work schedule, my route home, the insurance policy amount. John set the phone on the counter. Detective Walsh is reviewing it now. She'll be able to trace the purchase, the payment history, everything. Mary's eyes flicked to Evan, then back to John. This is a mistake. Some kind of. Evan's Lexus is parked outside. John continued. On a Tuesday night. Same night you usually have yoga class. Except there's no yoga studio in town. Just the Iron and Oak Bistro where you've been having lunch with him for months. Evan made a sound, half gasp, half whimper. How did you? Credit card statements. John looked at Mary. You weren't very careful. Mary's expression shifted again. The false innocence dropped away, replaced by something harder. Colder. So you've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. That's what you call it. Her voice rose. Stalking your own wife? Going through my private. You try to have me murdered. The kitchen went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the faucet Mary had been asking him to fix for weeks. Evan spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be dead, John finished. I know. You both thought I'd be easy to kill. Just some broken-down veteran who wouldn't see it coming. I never said that, Mary snapped. The driver quoted you. Word for word. Mary's jaw tightened. For several seconds, no one moved. Then she seemed to make a decision. Her posture changed, shoulders back, chin up. The victim act was over. You know what? Her voice was steady now, venomous. Maybe I did want you dead. Maybe that would have been better for everyone. Mary, Evan started, but she ignored him. You came back from overseas, and you just stopped. Stop trying. Stop caring about anything except your boring job and your boring routine. She gestured around the kitchen. I'm 34 years old, John. I didn't sign up to live like this. You signed up for marriage. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Marriage? We haven't had a real marriage in 3 years. You barely talk to me. You don't touch me. You just exist here like a piece of furniture. So you decided to cash in the life insurance. Why not? Mary's eyes flashed. At least that way I'd get something out of this disaster. At least I wouldn't be trapped anymore. John pulled out his phone, his actual phone, not the burner. He held it up so they could both see the red recording icon on the screen. Every word, he said quietly. Recorded. Mary's face went white. Evan made a choking sound. You can't. That's not legal. Mary reached for the phone, but John moved it out of range. Michigan is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of. He stopped the recording and saved the file. Detective Walsh will find this very interesting. You bastard. Mary's voice shook with rage now. All pretense gone. You set us up. No. You set yourselves up. John turned to Evan, who looked like he might pass out. How long have you two been planning this? Evan's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Tell him, Mary hissed. It doesn't matter now. About a year, Evan whispered. Mary took out the policy right after you started sleeping together, John said. Evan nodded miserably. She said the marriage was over anyway. Said you wouldn't even notice if she left. But the prenup. The prenup protected my assets in case of divorce, John explained, more to himself than to them. So she needed me dead instead. Accidental death means she gets everything. The insurance, the house, my veterans' benefits. It wasn't just about the money, Mary said, but her tone suggested otherwise. John looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. The woman he'd married 8 years ago was still there in the shape of her face, the color of her eyes. But everything else had changed. Or maybe it had always been this way, and he just refused to see it. The police are already involved, John said. The 2 men you hired are in custody. They're probably making their own deals right now, telling Walsh everything they know. We didn't hire them. Mary's voice rose toward hysterical. We didn't. I don't know who those men are. Stop. John's voice was sharp enough to cut through her panic. Just stop. The burner phone, the messages, the insurance policy. Evan just admitted you've been planning this for a year. He shook his head. Lying won't help you now. Mary's face crumpled. Real tears this time, not performance. She sank in her chair, her hands covering her face. Evan stood again, slower this time. I want a lawyer. Smart, John said. You'll need one. This is entrapment or coercion or something. You can't just. I can and I did. John pulled out his regular phone again. Now I'm calling the police. You can either sit here and wait for them, or you could try to run. Your choice. Evan looked at Mary, who was still crying into her hands. Then he looked at the doorway, calculating distances. I wouldn't, John said quietly. You won't make it to your car. The moment stretched out, tense and fragile. Finally, Evan sat back down. John dialed. Detective Walsh? This is John Week. I'm home now, and I have some additional information about tonight's incident. Walsh arrived 30 minutes later with 2 uniformed officers. By then, Mary had cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, and had settled into a cold, silent resentment. She sat at the kitchen table with her arms crossed, her jaw set, refusing to look at anyone. Evan had tried a different approach, cooperation mixed with self-preservation. He'd started talking even before the police arrived, telling John everything. How Mary had come to him 6 months into their affair with the idea. How he'd help her research accidental death clauses. How they'd found the 2 men through a cousin of Evan's who knew people. Walsh recorded all of it. You understand, the detective said to Evan, that everything you're telling us can and will be used against you? I want immunity, Evan said. Or a deal. I'll testify against her, tell you everything. That's not how this works, Walsh said. But cooperation will be noted. Mary finally spoke. Don't say anything else, Evan. Get a lawyer. It's too late for that, Walsh said, turning to Mary. Mrs. Week, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Mary didn't resist when a uniformed officer cuffed her. But as they led her toward the door, she turned to John one last time. Please. Just that one word, quiet and desperate. John didn't respond. He watched them take her away, his wife of 8 years, the woman he'd once thought he'd spend his life with, the woman who'd just tried to have him killed. Walsh stayed behind after the others left. She stood in John's kitchen, reviewing her notes. You handled this well, she said finally. Better than most people would. I had training. Still, she looked up at him. This is going to be complicated. The insurance company will investigate. There'll be a trial, probably multiple trials. Depositions. Testimony. It could take months, maybe longer. I understand. And you'll need to make some decisions. About this house, your finances, your life. Walsh's expression softened slightly. This is going to be hard, Mr. Week. Even if you did everything right. It's already hard, John said. But at least I'm alive to deal with it. Walsh nodded slowly. The 2 men you fought off, they're already talking. Trying to reduce their charges. They've confirmed everything Evan told us, plus some additional details we're still verifying. She paused. Your wife was very thorough. She researched everything. Timetables, locations, methods. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. How long will she be held? Judge will set bail tomorrow, but given the charges, Walsh shrugged. Probably remanded. Flight risk, danger to you, severity of the crimes. She's not going anywhere for a while. After Walsh left, John walked through the house room by room. The living room with its matching couches Mary had insisted on buying. The guest bedroom that had never had guests. The master bedroom upstairs with the king-size bed they hadn't shared in over a year. Every room held memories, some good, most recent ones painful. The house felt different now, contaminated by what he knew, by what had almost happened. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table where Mary and Evan had been drinking wine just hours earlier. Outside, the temperature dropped towards single digits. Inside, the house settled and creaked around him. John thought about the insurance policy, the messages, the casual way Mary had written about his death, like it was just another task to check off her list. He thought about the moment when he'd realized she was serious, not just unhappy, not just having an affair, but actively plotting to kill him. And he thought about tomorrow, and all the days after that. By the time dawn broke over Benton Falls, John had made his decision. Mary wanted money. She'd try to take his life to get it. Instead, she'd lose everything. And John would make sure of it. The bail hearing happened exactly as Detective Walsh predicted. Judge Brennan took one look at the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder for financial gain, insurance fraud, and denied bail entirely. The defendant poses a clear flight risk and a continued danger to the victim, Brennan stated from a bench, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Remanded to county custody pending trial. John sat in the gallery and watched Mary's face as the judge spoke. She'd been composed, walking into the courtroom, her public defender whispering instructions. But when the word remanded left the judge's mouth, something cracked in her expression. She'd expected to get out, expected to make bail, go home, prepare her defense from the comfort of freedom. Instead, the bailiff approached with handcuffs. Mary's eyes found John in the crowd. For just a moment, he saw the woman he'd married, scared, vulnerable, human. Then her expression hardened into hate so pure it was almost admirable. The bailiff led her away. Orange jumpsuit, chains. The whole process had taken less than 15 minutes. Evan's hearing was scheduled for later that afternoon. John didn't stay for it. Instead, he drove to downtown Benton Falls and parked outside the offices of Midwest Mutual Insurance. The building was new construction, brick facade, glass entrance, the kind of place that tried too hard to look trustworthy. Mary had worked here for 2 years, part-time in customer service. John walked inside and asked for the manager. Gerald Hoffman was a broad man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He led John to a small conference room and closed the door. "Mr. Week," Hoffman said carefully, "I heard about what happened. I'm very sorry. Did you know?" John asked. "About Mary and Evan?" Hoffman's face reddened. "I suspected. We have policies against inter-office relationships, but—" He shook his head. "I should have been more diligent. I'm here about the insurance policy." "Of course." Hoffman pulled out a folder, already prepared. "We've been contacted by the police. The policy you're referring to was taken out 14 months ago, correct?" "Yes. $500,000, accidental death benefit, spouse as primary beneficiary." Hoffman opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. "We've frozen the policy pending the criminal investigation. Given the circumstances, there will almost certainly be a civil fraud investigation as well." "I want to cancel," John said. "Not frozen. Cancel." Hoffman looked up. "You're the insured party, but your wife is the policy holder and beneficiary. Legally, the cancellation request would normally need to come from, my wife is in jail for trying to have me killed to collect on this policy." John kept his voice even. "I don't want her to have any claim to it, now or ever." Hoffman was quiet for a moment. "I understand. Let me consult with our legal team. Given the criminal charges, we may be able to void the policy entirely based on fraud and inducement." He made a note. "Can you provide documentation? Police reports, court filings?" Detective Walsh said she'd forward everything to you. "Good." Hoffman closed the folder. "Mr. Week, I have to ask, did you have any knowledge of this policy before last night?" "No. And you never consented to being insured for this amount." "Mary handled all our insurance. I signed paperwork when we bought the house, but I never reviewed the details." John paused. "That was a mistake. An understandable one," Hoffman said gently. "Most people trust their spouses with these matters. Most people's spouses don't try to kill them." Hoffman winced. "No, I suppose not." They talked for another 30 minutes about the investigation timeline, the likelihood of policy cancellation, the potential for civil recovery if the court found Mary had made payments with joint funds. "Everything was joint," John said. "Joint accounts, joint assets. Even this policy was paid from our shared checking account. Then you may have grounds to recover those payments," Hoffman explained, "along with punitive damages, depending on how the criminal case resolves." John didn't care about the money. He cared about making sure Mary never saw a penny from her scheme. When he left the insurance office, the afternoon sun was already dropping toward the horizon. Winter days were short in Michigan. John drove past his house, their house, and kept going out toward Old Quarry Road where everything had started less than 24 hours ago. The road looked different in daylight, less ominous. The trees were bare, the lake visible through the branches, frozen at the edges but still moving in the center. John parked where he'd parked yesterday, where the two men had forced him to stop. There were still tire marks on the shoulder, a small evidence marker that the police had missed. The revolver was gone, collected as evidence. John sat in his truck with the engine running, heat blasting against the cold. He thought about how close he'd come to dying here. If the men had been professionals, if they planned better, if John hadn't noticed the tail in time, Mary would be planning a funeral right now instead of sitting in a cell. The thought didn't make him angry anymore, just tired. His phone rang. Detective Walsh. Mr. Week, I wanted to update you on the investigation. Go ahead. Both suspects, Richard Morrison and David Klein, have agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges. They've provided detailed statements about how your wife contacted them, what she paid them, what she instructed them to do. How did she find them? Klein is a second cousin to Evan Cross. He's done time for assault, knows people. Your wife approached him through Evan, offered $10,000 total for what she called a clean job. Walsh's voice hardened. They've also provided text messages, payment records, even audio recordings Klein made without her knowledge. He was worried about getting double-crossed. Smart of him. Criminals often are, in their own way. Papers rustled on Walsh's end. The prosecutor is building a strong case. With the physical evidence, the testimony, the recordings, and now Klein and Morrison's cooperation, your wife is looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. And Evan, he'll probably get 10 to 15. He cooperated, but he was still integral to the planning. The prosecutor isn't inclined to be generous. Walsh paused. There's something else. We pulled your wife's financial records. She's been moving money around for the past 6 months, transferring funds from your joint accounts into a personal savings account you probably didn't know existed. How much? Almost $30,000. John closed his eyes. His deployments, his construction paychecks, everything he'd saved, carefully transferred out of their shared life and into Mary's escape plan. We can recover that, Walsh continued. It's marital property. The court will order restitution as part of her sentencing. I don't want her money, John said. I want her to understand what she's lost. She will. Trust me, Mr. Week. By the time this is over, she'll understand completely. The trial took 8 months to reach court. During that time, John sold the house. Couldn't stand being there anymore, walking past the kitchen where Mary had sat with Evan, sleeping in the bed where she'd lain next to him while planning his murder. He moved into a small apartment downtown, barely furnished, just a place to sleep between work shifts. Thornton gave him more hours, more responsibility. The work helped, kept his hands busy, his mind occupied. Evan Cross took a plea deal in month 5, 12 years, eligible for parole in 8. His lawyer called it a victory. John called it justice delayed. Mary refused every plea offer the prosecutor made. She wanted a trial, wanted to present her story, wanted a jury to see her side. Her attorney, a public defender named Rebecca Mills who looked exhausted, tried to convince her otherwise. The evidence is overwhelming, Mills had told her in a meeting John wasn't supposed to know about. But Detective Walsh kept him informed. The messages, the recordings, the testimony from the hitmen, from Evan, from the insurance company. There's nothing to argue. I didn't do anything, Mary insisted. This is all John's word against mine. He's lying. He's unstable from the war. Mrs. Week, you're on recording admitting to the plan. That was coerced. He threatened me. Mills had looked at her client for a long moment. No jury's going to believe that. But Mary wouldn't listen. She fired Mills and hired a private attorney named Thomas Westbrook with money borrowed from her parents. Westbrook was slick, expensive, and specialized in creating reasonable doubt where none existed. He took the case knowing he'd lose. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented their evidence methodically. Detective Walsh testified about the burner phone, the messages, the coordinated timing of the attack. Morrison and Klein testified about being hired, about the specific instructions Mary had given them. The insurance investigator testified about the policy, about Mary's research into accidental death clauses. Evan Cross testified via video from prison. He looked smaller on screen, diminished. He told the jury everything: the affair, the planning, Mary's obsession with the insurance money. She said John would never see it coming. Evan said quietly, his eyes downcast. She said he was too broken to notice what was happening around him. The prosecutor asked if Evan had ever tried to stop Mary. No. Evan's voice was barely audible. I loved her. I thought we'd be together after her husband was dead. Yes. The defense tried to paint John as paranoid, controlling, possibly violent. Westbrook showed photos of Morrison's injuries, Klein's concussion. My client was scared of this man, Westbrook argued. A trained soldier who came back from war, changed, aggressive. She was trapped, but the recordings undermined everything. Mary's voice, clear and cold. Maybe I did want you dead. Maybe that would have been better for everyone. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing happened 3 weeks later. John sat in the same gallery seat he'd occupied for the bail hearing months ago. Mary was led in wearing the same orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face pale. Judge Brennan reviewed the case file before speaking. Mrs. Week, you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to murder your husband for financial gain. You researched methods. You recruited accomplices. You coordinated timing and location. You showed no remorse when confronted and no acceptance of responsibility throughout this trial. Mary stood with her attorney, her hands clasped in front of her. The law provides specific penalties for crimes of this nature, Brennan continued. Conspiracy to commit murder carries 15 to 30 years. Attempted murder carries 20 to 40 years. Insurance fraud carries 5 to 10 years. He looked at Mary over his glasses. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. Mary's knees buckled slightly. Westbrook caught her arm. I hereby sentence you to 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, 30 years for attempted murder, and 7 years for insurance fraud. Total sentence, 62 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. 62 years. Mary was 35. She'd be 97 before she was eligible for release. The bailiff moved forward with handcuffs. Mary turned to look at John one final time. She mouthed a single word. Please. John sat perfectly still. His face showed nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not pity. Nothing at all. Mary was led away, and John walked out of the courtroom into cold Michigan sunshine. 6 months after the sentencing, John left Benton Falls for good. He'd wrapped up everything, sold the last of the furniture, closed the joint accounts, filed the divorce papers that Mary couldn't contest from prison. The house sale had gone through quickly. Young couple, excited about their first home, no idea what had almost happened there. John didn't tell them. Wasn't required to by law. He drove north for 3 hours, into the Upper Peninsula where the lakes were wilder and the towns were smaller. Found a place near Munising, right on the shore of Lake Superior. Small cabin, maybe 800 square feet, with a dock and a fireplace and nothing else for a mile in either direction. Perfect. The work was different up here. Seasonal construction, some guiding for tourists in summer, odd jobs that paid cash. John didn't need much. The house sale had left him with money. The divorce had given him back his savings. He lived simply. The cabin had 1 bedroom, a combined kitchen and living area, and a porch that faced the water. John spent evenings there, watching the sun set over Superior, the light turning the watercolors that didn't have names. People in Munising were friendly, but not intrusive. They knew John had been in the service. The way he carried himself made that obvious. They knew he'd come from downstate. They didn't ask for details. He made acquaintances. The guy at the hardware store who gave him tips on winterizing cabin. The woman at the diner who always remembered he took his coffee black. The retired ranger who taught him where the best fishing spots were. None of them knew about Mary, about the trial, about 62 years in prison. John didn't volunteer the information. Sometimes, late at night, when the lake was quiet and the stars were impossibly bright, John thought about his old life. The marriage that had failed slowly, then catastrophically. The moment he'd read those text messages and understood what his wife had become. People asked sometimes, when they learned he'd been married, why it ended. We grew apart, John would say. Simple. True enough. He didn't hate Mary. That would require energy, attention, emotional investment. She'd made her choices. The law had made its judgment. That chapter was closed. What John felt instead was relief. Relief that he'd noticed a car following him. Relief that the hitmen had been amateurs. Relief that training and instinct had saved his life when love and trust would have killed him. A year after settling in Munising, John started sleeping well again. Really sleeping, not just lying in bed waiting for dawn. The nightmares from his deployments faded. The hypervigilance that had been his constant companion for years eased back to normal awareness. The cabin became home. He added a workshop in back, started building furniture in his spare time. Nothing fancy, tables, chairs, simple pieces made from local wood. He sold some in town, gave others away to neighbors. The rhythm of the work was satisfying. Measure, cut, join, finish. Tangible progress. Visible results. One evening in late summer, John sat on his porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun drop toward the horizon. The temperature was perfect, warm enough to be comfortable, cool enough to hint at fall coming. The water was calm, reflecting clouds and perfect mirror images. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Walsh, the first communication they'd had in months. Thought you'd want to know. Mary Week denied parole. Next hearing in 5 years. John read the message twice, then deleted it. Mary would be in prison for the rest of her natural life. She tried to buy freedom with his death. Instead, she'd purchased decades of concrete walls and controlled movements and the slow erosion of hope. That was the hardest currency there is, time. Years measured in visiting hours and parole hearings and the gradual realization that the life you wanted was gone forever. John set his phone aside and returned his attention to the lake. The sun touched the horizon, and the light changed. Gold to amber to deep orange. The water caught fire with reflection. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called, wild and lonesome and utterly free. John raised his coffee in a silent toast. To survival. To justice. To the peace that comes from knowing you did everything right when everything went wrong. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge. John finished his coffee and went inside, closing the cabin door behind him. Tomorrow he'd work. He'd fish. He'd live the quiet life he'd built from the ruins of the old one. Tonight, he'd sleep well. And that was enough.